This episode and every episode is sponsored by my company, JDAQA Software Testing. We're your one-stop shop for manual, automated, performance, and security testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The First Customer. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Steve. Coop Tank? Cooper? Nice to see you, Steve.
Good to see you, Jay. Yeah, Steve Cooper. Everyone basically calls me Coop. All my life, they've called me that. So, yeah.
All right. I'm dying to hear more about Coop Tank. I've seen it on LinkedIn, but I don't know much about it. So let's start kind of at the beginning. Give me a little bit of your background. Where'd you come from originally, and kind of where'd you go to school?
I'm a Cherry Hill guy. I grew up to Cherry Hill, graduated Cherry Hill East. And then I went to Stockton State, which is now Stockton University in Pomona, New Jersey. So I'm a Jersey guy. Graduated college in '86. Started selling fax machines. Date myself, because I would have sold copiers, but I had a Fiero and you couldn't put a copier in there. And as I was selling fax machines, I started hitting the open mics in Philly to do stand-up comedy. And I hit them every night, man. I hit every stage I could hit. I got a job working the door at the Comedy Factory outlet. And within like 2 years, I was working weekends in all the clubs. In 3 years, I was on the road. I was on the road doing comedy. That was my job. I did that for about 7 years and eventually, burned out a little bit out of it. Got married to my first wife, moved to the West Coast, and then I was in LA for a long time. And my now wife, she moved out to LA with me, and we moved back to New Jersey 6 years ago.
Wow. So you definitely, I was going to say, you definitely have like a LA kind of vibe to you, very chill, maybe more chill than the Philly metro area that we normally get on this podcast. But so what brought you back? Did you kind of miss home, or what brought you back to Jersey?
Well, it's not a long story. In LA, and I've done a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of stuff in LA. I did stand up. I was a hand model. I was on NCI, some West Row with my hands.
Oh, like George Costanza, the hand model.
Yeah, exactly. I was like Costanza, and I did some corporate restaurant marketing. And when my wife moved out, it changed my life a lot. I was sort of burned on LA. I'd started my podcast, Cooper Talk, 12 years ago in a studio where I had a lot of actors coming in. But as everything changed, I figured I could do that anywhere. And in LA, you can't buy a house. I mean, bottom line is a 1,300 square foot house with 3 bedroom and a bathroom and a half will cost you $900,000 to $1 million.
Yep.
So my wife moved out with me from Jersey, and then we ended up. She owns a condo here. And we said, you know what, it's time to move. And I had burned on LA. LA was great when you're younger. It's always a hustle. It's always a grind. And the East Coast mentality does work a lot better because you have that mentality because there's people from everywhere. And yeah, 6 years ago, we got a moving truck, picked our stuff up, put one of our cars on a jack, whatever the trailer, and then we jumped on a plane and landed back in New Jersey. And I've been here since.
Wow. How I'm interested about the transition from fax salesman to stand-up comic. Was it just you thought you were funny and you thought you'd give it a shot? Like how the hell did you take the leap from that and actually get up on stage?
Well, when I was younger, I was never a class clown, and most comedians who have had a career aren't the class clown. But I had always people who said you were funny, and I was in college. I was in the Mr. Stockton contest. It was like a Mr. America contest, but I did it as a joke. I was a freshman that hung out with a lot of seniors because I always made them laugh. So I did that, and I got my first taste of stage. And I said to my mom and dad, I said, I eventually want to do comedy. And they said, well, we want you to get your degree. And I have a degree in business management, a Bachelor of Science. And my mom found a ad. There used to be something called the Learning Annex. It was in Philadelphia, and it was a class, and you go. And you can't teach someone to be funny. That's just the bottom line. It's like you can't teach someone to network. You can give them insight.
Right.
But I went and they had me get my stuff together, and I got my act together, my 5 minutes. And I still remember I went to the Comedy Factory outlet in Philadelphia, had some few friends there. I went up, I did my act. I did great. And then I came back the next week and I died. And I had the worst set. So I didn't go back for like 2 months. And finally went back and I was a young guy. I was a nice guy. I was a good-looking guy. I had hair at the time. And people liked me. And so a lot of older acts mentored me, and they would say, just no matter what, get on stage. So I just got on stage and I worked my ass off, man. I mean, I would drive, any of these gigs, and then working at the Comedy Factory outlet for $5 an hour, but we got to see all the great comics, and we got to learn, and we got good spots. So it just came from that. I just started getting on stage, and like anything, I started getting better, and it wasn't overnight, and it was a lot of work. But then I got a guy named Grover Silcox, took me to a gig in State College. He had known me from the outlet, and was booked by a guy who at the time had 7 or 8 clubs in the area, the Comedy Cabaret. And when I got back, the guy called and said, Grover said you did great. I'm going to fill your calendar up. So I got 40 weekends of work. And so that got me into the next level where I was constantly working. Now, given I was only making like $200 a weekend, but with a day job and that, it was good, but I didn't care. And that got me into where I kept getting good stage time. And then eventually, like anything, you branch out. And I met people, and I was a good networker. I learned it from college, and I had a business savvy, like a lot of comics didn't. And I just started getting work. And next year, I find myself in Florida and in Virginia and going on these 10-night runs of just one-night stands that were awful, but they paid the bills. And you were just sitting there going, I don't need a day job, and I can do this. And it was a good feeling. And it was, And it was a crazy life. It was a fun life. It was a lot, but it was also. There was also discipline. You learn, you get the stories about the comics were party animals. Yeah, man, I love to party as much as the next guy, but I never went on stage. I was always sober when I went on stage because I treated it like my job, and I did networking, and I would talk to comics, and a lot of young comics would be like asking guys, oh, can you set me up with this booker? You've seen it at network, and people give you a business card. They want the stuff right away. I would hang out with the guys. I would talk to them, and at the end of the weekend, they'd say to me, hey, I hope to work with you again. And I go, yeah, I'd love to work for such and such. And they go, oh, you don't work for them? I go, no. And they go, oh, you know what? We'll put a good word in for you. And I would get that work that way. So I advanced fast, and it was fun. But it was like anything. I'm starting to get out of it. I was living outside New York. I moved outside New York. And my ex-wife was a little batshit crazy. And we ended up moving to the West Coast. And I eventually moved to Hollywood.
Wow. Who was kind of the big names that you got to see out there when you were coming up?
In Philly, when I was coming up, we had Dice Clay just before he blew up. And when I started doing comedy, in the middle, like a year into it, I started doing a character. It was before Urkel, it was before Screech. It was Steve the Stud. I pulled my pants up and I opened for Dice, and it was my first big gig, and I killed, and it was great. And saw Dice, we saw Tim Allen before he took off, Mo Phillips, Gilbert Gottfried, all the guys, Dom Irrera, Elaine Boozler, Wendy Liebman, who I've become good friends with. A lot of these people through my podcast I've become friends with. And it was just, you saw them and you saw what they did, and it's inspired you. And a lot of times people don't want to look at someone and go, oh, they won't look at someone to mentor. But for me, even if just a working comic, like a headliner, and I was an opener or the second act, the headliner came up after a show and said, hey, you should try this bit. I would listen. And it's like anything. And you probably know, people will give you suggestions about business. Sometimes you're like, that sucks, and you know it. But then sometimes you're going, that's right. But I would always listen. And I learned so much just watching comics and just being around it. It's like anything. You really have to just hanging out with comics after the show. There was a camaraderie. We had this brotherhood. You would look out for your other guy. And it's like, for me, I'm doing a show this Saturday at City Winery, Philly, and I'm doing it with Joe Matarese, who's done Letterman a few times. And Joe was a guy who was under me. I was after fax machines. I got into credit card marketing. I was a manager. I was Joe, because my friend ran the company. I was Joe's manager, and I helped him get into comedy. And when I moved to the West Coast, he took over my apartment in North Jersey. So when I moved back here, he was like, when I first moved back 6 years ago, he was doing helium. He's like, open for me. I said, yeah. Then we did a show a year and a half ago. I brought 60 people. We had 350 people there. And for City Winery, he said, Coop, come open for me. And I said, all right, I definitely will. So
that's awesome, man. That's a hell of a story. And I think being likable, like you said, is not necessarily something you can learn. It's kind of, you're just built with it. But it doesn't matter what what vein of business you're in. Being likable will get you a lot further than trying hard and being the guy at the networking event, like you said, that's handing out the cards and saying, we can help you, we can do all these things. You're like, we're not all, you're not here to help me, you're here to sell to me. Like, let's just be, you got to be friendly, you got to be an approachable person, right?
Yeah, it's like anything in life. It's about relationships. You build a relationship. I always say, when it comes to networking. We both, we know you network. We have to network, especially now. I always say, if you go to networking to build relationships, just like comedy. I didn't go to comedy to make friends. Like I don't go to networking events to make friends. If you're going to a networking group event to be popular, just go back to high school and try to be the prom king or queen. Because, it's a matter of you go to networking to network. We have our friends. I'm sure you have your group of friends, and people used to say, oh, during the pandemic, they're like, oh, are you going to that event? And I'm like, me and my wife haven't even gone out to lunch. I said, you think I'm going to go to pay $45 for a lunch and have if I'm going to catch COVID, I'm going to have it when I'm out with my wife. I actually caught COVID towards the end of the pandemic at a Blondie concert because I was comped by the bassist. So I went there and I was like, oh, this is a great season. Oh, I'm sitting, no one's around me really, and I caught it. But it was one of those things that, networking is it's just as you said, anything in life and business, just be likable. My motto is don't be a jerk.
Right.
If you show up and you're just polite, people are going to like you. And they may, but if you try too hard, you're sort of screwed.
Yeah, there's a weird balance, and it's I think it's natural to some people, and it's not natural to others. To stay on the comedy thing for one more second, who is or do you stay up with comedy? Like, who's your kind of your current favorite? Like, who's out there doing it today that you really like that's popular?
I'll be honest, I really don't watch comedy anymore.
No?
I'll watch Dave Chappelle.
Okay, of course.
Because Chappelle, I met Dave when he was 16. I was doing Garbins in D.C. It was him, the opener, me, the feature, which is the money spot, 30 minutes, easy. And this guy, Roger Merzick. So Dave goes on, he's 16 years old. He's from D.C. He went to an art school down there, the Count Basie, I believe, school. Goes up, kills. I go up, oh yeah, no problem. I eat it. So I go back to the hotel. I'm a mess. The insecurities come in. You feel like when you get off stage and you have a bad set, you just feel worthless.
Right.
And so the next show, Saturday, he goes up. He does great, but I follow him. I destroy. And I got I'm back. Late show, I ate it more than I did on Friday. I didn't even stay at the hotel. I drove back to South Jersey, took my check. So I'll watch Dave. I did watch Chris Rock's special because I think Chris Rock is very good. I don't really watch a lot of comedy anymore just because I've done over 2,500 shows in my life. So, you'll see some. I've watched parts of it. I'll watch, SNL when the person does a monologue, but I don't really watch it that much anymore.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. My wife and I are big comedy fans. We do Helium is one of our favorite spots just because it's so.
Who do you like? Who are your guys?
Nate Bargatze is like our number one guy. We actually found him on like one of those Netflix things where they have like 5 or 6 different comics, and then he's just kind of exploded.
Quick story about Nate. Cooper Talk, my podcast I started 12 years ago. I would get comics because I'm friends with Paul F. Tompkins and people like that. And I saw Nate Bargatze, and we were friends on Facebook. He came into the studio, and at the time, Mark Maron had said he was his favorite comic, so Nate started blowing up then. Mark Maron tweeted, "This guy's awesome." And then he was the nicest guy. He works clean. And in the 10 years, I mean, he's gone from, he was an actor, but now he has this big tour coming.
Yeah,
Very funny.
We're going out in Hershey, man. I can't wait.
Cool.
We did trying to remember where we went. He was here a few years ago. Maybe it was the Keswick he was at or something. I can't remember exactly where he was at, but we did the backstage thing, and my wife wanted to meet him, so we did that. And he's, I remember I said, my wife said, "Oh, this is for our 5-year anniversary or whatever," and he said, "Well, maybe for 10 you'll get Seinfeld." So I was like, "We got a running joke from Nate, and that's a feather in my cap." So we've enjoyed him. So we'll be seeing him, I think, in a couple weeks. Good. Between that and Taylor Swift, we've got a busy May. My wife's all excited about. How could you not be?
I hate people that I interview a lot of musicians, and I'm always envious of musicians because I suck. Like my brother drums, my sister played the French horn and the cello, my dad played the sax. Can't play anything. I couldn't even make it through Guitar Lab. And I'll tell you, I listened to Swift one night. I was listening to her Red album or whatever. Mm-hmm. I was sitting in the living room and had a few beers, and I was like, I'm gonna listen to this. And she's good, man. And she's got pipes, and she plays her stuff. And people who trash her don't know anything about music. Because she's a definition of what a musician should be. So she sings about old boyfriends. So what? Everyone does it. Look listen to any metal song,
Oh yeah.
Motley
Yep.
Crue, Go Away Man, whatever. It's good. You'll have fun. That'll be a great show.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. So tell me a little bit about Coop Tank. How'd you start it? Where did the concept come from? And kind of what's behind the name?
Well, the Coop Tank is my business podcast, and it's a paid group I have where we only have like 5 or 6 of us it's a think tank, and I wanted to have a good name, and my podcast is Cooper Talk. I'm doing a TV show for RBN called Cooper Talk Local because it's all established musicians and comics from the area. I wanted to branch away from that, and I thought, what sounds good? And the Coop Tank popped in my head, and then I sat and I found my graphic designer, and I said, give me a cool logo, and I want it blue with the bubbles. So we did that. And it's just basically the Coop Tank podcast. Actually, it's funny because I'm reevaluating the Coop Tank podcast. I've been doing the Coop Tank podcast. I do with interviews with business people who have a good story. Like I'm friends with Tony Luke Jr. He came on. Dave Raymond, the original Philly fanatic. Joe Conklin, I've known for years. Joe built a brand. The crazy guy at the Eagles game with the silver and green face,
Yeah,
Sean Young. I met him at an Eagles game in Arizona years ago. He built a brand. I had Christina Renna, the president of the chamber. She has a backstory. My financial planner, the young Jim Turpin, is the youngest of 13 adopted kids. People with a story. I've had some people from out of the area. I'm really good friends with Jason Aldean's drummer. He's also a motivational speaker. I had him. So I did that just to have people tell a story about how they got, not what they do, because everyone can sit there and say, oh, I'm a banker. Well, yeah, okay, yeah, no shit. I mean,
Right.
sorry for the language, but it's like
No,
people
no.
say, I'm a banker, and you're like, okay, so why are you a banker? I want to hear why people do what they do. And it was good, but then I was sitting there going, I've done so many interviews, like a normal week, I'll do 2 or 3 Cooper Talk interviews, my TV show, and a Coop Tank. And so I have 3 interviews scheduled, and after that, I'm either going to do it every other week or every week. I'm going to change the Coop Tank, the podcast, into if you have a Phillies hat, so like an Around the Horn type TV show. But
Yeah,
with
yeah.
me and 3 other people just talking about, may it be networking, may it be computers, may it be whatever. That way it gets down to a bigger audience. It sheds light on my paid networking group, the Coop Tank, where we basically just talk about things in business and what, like we talked about what bothers us about LinkedIn and the self-proclaimed experts and all that stuff. We go into that. Because I always say proclaiming yourself an expert is like giving yourself a nickname. You just don't do it. You shouldn't do it. It's like you want to hear people say, I mean, I've done over 1,000 interviews, and I would never say I'm an expert interviewer because I learn every day. And I've learned with business people because interviewing a celebrity is one thing. You have the whole backdrop. Oh, you're in this TV. Like I interviewed Steven Van Zandt. I'm a huge Springsteen fan.
Right.
I was with Steven for an hour and a half. I knew what to talk to him about, and I knew where to go, and I knew he was promoting something. With a business person, you always don't know. And that's when the nuggets come out. That's when people open up to you. And people sit there. I had one guy who actually went into his whole social anxiety, and after he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I spoke about it. So that's the Coop Tank. The Coop Tank is a dual, the podcast and the networking group. And I also have another networking group that I invited you to, which is free, Coffee with Cooper, which I started during the pandemic because at the time I was in business development for Coit Cleaning and Restoration, my friend's company that I started when I got when I got back. And we would sit there. I would just go to plumbing supply stores and give them sandwiches. Well, I couldn't do that anymore. We had a pandemic. So I started a networking group, and I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And I'll tell you, in the middle of the pandemic, I was getting twice a week, 50 to 60 people every Tuesday and Thursday. And so I kept that going just because I think networking is very important. I ramble a lot. I'm sorry.
No, I'm loving it, man.
Go off on tangents.
I started this podcast. I mean, look, everybody does podcasts for marketing to some degree, right? I mean, you're doing it to get yourself out, to talk about things, to learn things, to share things. But I think when you have a successful business or a podcast or whatever, people ask you questions and they say, "How do you do that? And how would you start one?" And blah blah blah. And it's like you alluded to as well. I can't stand the experts that proclaim that they're experts, and I could not see myself being the, hey, I can help you scale your business up by 100%. I'm that, I just don't like that vein of things. And I figured interviewing people that have successful businesses from different walks of life. People could listen to this and maybe pull out some things that if they're thinking of that line of career or job or business or whatever, like pull that out and maybe apply some of it. I'm not going to say anybody's going to go start a business after listening to this podcast, but that's why I started, because it was kind of a happy medium for me where I could at least learn some myself and then, share some of that stuff out without, kind of trying to proclaim that I know what I'm talking about. Because as I always say, especially in business, like if you say your business is 100% this, I think you're full of shit, right? Because you're constantly pivoting, you're changing, you figure out what's going on, you're learning new things, you're changing who your audience is, you're figuring out what, who you're trying to sell to, who's buying what you're selling. And it all kind of feeds itself. And if you kind of get in that cycle, I think those are successful people in life. So, a lot of these questions I had are for kind of the standard business guy, which I'm actually enjoying not running through this list is a little bit different. So, talk to me about, from a niche perspective, like who is it and why is it that people would come to be in your paid networking group, or, why would they subscribe to the Cooper Talk podcast or listen to Coop Talk? Like what's your hook and what do you have that, people would find interesting?
Well, and I'm a really good interviewer. I have no problem saying that. I only say that because, I interviewed a guy named Graham Parker. Graham Parker is an English rocker who I'm a huge fan of. And I remember he posted the interview, and people on his Facebook page were saying, this is the best interview we've ever heard. Movie Valley Girl, Deborah Foreman was a star of Valley Girl. She sat there on Twitter, was like, this is the best interview I've ever done. People will listen because I don't call them interviews. I call them organic chats. Because an interview, I don't do any, I do my research. Okay, if it's an artist, like I'm interviewing George Lynch, who was in Dokken tomorrow, and he's in a bunch of other groups. I don't know a whole bunch about George Lynch, but I know people like him. I just did that with Joe Satriani. People love Joe Satriani. I didn't know much about him. People said it was a really inspirational interview.
I love Joe.
I talked to him, and you should listen to that show. He was wonderful. People will listen to my show, and what they like about it is it's genuine. I don't write any questions out. I don't care. Okay, there's a band called Great White. A big fire. People died. I had Jack Russell on. I'm not going to ask Jack Russell that. But people get comfortable with me where he goes, oh, yeah, by the way, I was opening for Aerosmith, and Steven Tyler goes, you're the guy who shot the maid. And I said, you shot a maid? And he went into this whole story how he used to they used to steal coke from people like Boogie Nights and sell it. And one time he did angel dust, and there was a gun in the house, and he shot a maid. And he told this whole story. I get that out of people because people listen to me because I won. And I got a very good compliment from a guy in Coffee with Cooper who finally listened to my show, and he said, you're one of the only podcasters, and you're doing it now, which is good. He said, you're one of the only podcasters who is quiet the whole time when his guest speaks. And I've learned this. My guests listen to Cooper Talk, not because of me, but because of my guests. I've always had an ability to get good guests from when I started in LA, because it was in a studio. And a lot of these character actors, people don't reach out to them. If you watch Better Call Saul, the blonde, Patrick Fabian. Patrick did my show after the second season. I liked him, and I said, I like this character. I hit up another actor and said, do you know Patrick Fabian? Patrick came in the studio. I'm in the studio with him for an hour. We hit it off. He's from Harrisburg, went to Penn State, area guy. And then after the fifth season, I sent him a message on Facebook, and I said, hey, Pat, I didn't want to text you because I haven't talked to you in like 3.5 years. And he goes, text away. Did my show. And so when the series wrapped up, and if you don't watch people, I won't give he was in a great cliffhanger in the end of the first part. I texted him and he came on. So people come on because the guests have fun. I talked to my guests for 20 minutes after the I push stop. I think people will listen to my show because for Cooper Talk, they'll listen to the show because I'm not a fanboy. Okay, I look at these people as my equal. I've been intimidated. I had Ed Asner in the studio, sitting across from Big, and he's got his pants pulled up to his chest, and he ended up, But people listen to me. I get the information. I have a different interview style. I don't write my questions. I do answer. I'll ask 3 questions at one time, sometimes parts of 3, and I get a long answer. I had Tom Arnold on. I just said, Tom, tell me good Hollywood stories. Entertaining. I was entertained. For the Coop Talk, they should listen to the Coop Talk because you're going to hear people you know, and you're going to find out things you don't know about them.
Right.
And you're going to say, you know what? They have failed. They started their business. I get people, I always say, like, when it comes to if you're going to have a consultant, if I'm going to have a consultant, I want someone who's lost the business because they know what happens. And they can
Right.
say, well, here's what you shouldn't do. And so the Coop Tank, the podcast, they should listen because one, they know the people, but two, I have good stories and interesting people and people that I know personally. And a lot of times it's people who are used to doing a podcast where they talk 10 or 15 minutes with questions in front of them. I had someone came in and made a book. And they said, so I go, what's that? They go, well, we'll talk about it. I said, no. I said, I don't plan anything, man.
Right.
You told me a story. This woman told me a great story about how, she changed her career when she was crying in the bathroom for a shitty job at the Outback. And I said, man. And it fascinated me because people with this story fascinate me. Like I go to events and people are like, oh, you have such a big background. When I first started back here with my friend's company, I didn't tell anyone my background. I didn't tell anyone I did stand up. The only reason they found out, I did a benefit for a guy, and half the South Jersey Chamber of Commerce was there. And they're like, we didn't know you did comedy. You're so quiet and professional at the events. And I said, because I go to the events for a business. I don't have to sell myself.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's why they'll listen to the Coop Tank, just because they're going to hear good stories of good business people, and they're going to find out that everyone, I don't care who you are, everyone goes through a hard time. People go through depression. People go through self-doubt, especially us creative types. You wake up, you go, and that's what I want to get across to people. And if they have a smile, the person I just interviewed, Christina Renner from the Chamber of Commerce, said, you are great at this. And that
Right.
made me feel good. Because
Yeah.
I just go into I want my guests to look good.
Right.
I want the people to be entertained. If you like me, that's fine. You can hate me, but if you like my guest story, if you're, let's say, I don't know, a David Duchovny fan, I don't know if you know David. Yeah, he may hate me, but if you like David and David says to me once, which he did during an interview, great question, I'm fine. That's all.
Right. Yeah, especially with somebody that's had as many interviews as he's had. That's a nice little compliment. Um, so if you had to start it all over again, and knowing the things you know today, what would you do? What would be your first step of starting Coop Tank tomorrow if you needed to start a really cool, kind of influential, podcast like you do today or show or whatever it is? What would be your first step?
I would just work my ass off. I tend to get, as you get older, you get a little bit lazier, and I wouldn't be afraid of self promo. I don't, I'm not good at taking compliments. Okay. I would sit there and say, it's okay. It's okay to take a compliment. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a bad person. I think, I feel weird when someone's like, oh, with my network coffee with Cooper, well, we appreciate you. For me, I'm just doing what I was brought up to do.
Right.
I want to help people out and I want to entertain people. And that's, I can't really give the wisdom because the Coop Tank is in its early stages, But it's like anything. In LA, if I was back to go back in LA and move out in LA, well, one, even though things happen, I would have never married my first wife. But then I don't know if I would have ended up in LA, and I don't know if I'd end up with my wife now, who's wonderful. In LA, I would have concentrated more on the biz. I think I got in anything. I thought I went through a little depression. I hated to be at home alone, so I was out partying all the night. I was out at the bars, and I knew everyone. And when I was in restaurant marketing and corporate restaurant marketing, well, you know what? You're out every night, and you're
Right.
talking to people, and you're getting to know. And you sit there, and then you wake up feeling like crap because you're drinking, and and it's one of those things. I would have been more disciplined towards my entertainment career, but I did fine I ended up in a corporate restaurant marketing job for this cool chain. I just fell into it, and so that's the thing. I think anyone who starts a business, well, one, there's work involved. When I worked for Coit, I did business development because the one owner, my friend Mike, he sucks at going out and working people, talking to people. But his company was it was strong because over the 20 years when they started, you work your ass off. You want to network, but I think a lot of people, they start businesses, they want to network more than they actually want to work. And you
Right.
have to understand, I see people go to all these events. Well, when are you doing work? It's like when, now, like I was in business development, so my job was to go to events. But
Right.
if you're an
Yep.
owner, you can't, I would just say really concentrate on what you want. Any person who opens a job, really find out what you want. Because a lot of people, and especially now, everyone thinks, oh, I can just work for myself or I can do this. I've been working for myself. When I did comedy, I was working for myself. And I mean, I did it right. I was one of those people that had my press kits. I took it serious. And the thing is, a lot of times people, you can't worry about what other people think. If you're doing crappy, tell people. So many people want to fake it till they make it. I don't know anyone. If someone came up to me and said, hey, Steve, my business sucks. You know this person. Can you introduce me to them? I'd be like, yeah. But if someone's like me, hey, can you introduce me to this guy? Well, I thought your business was doing great. You know that guy? So I think it's just people really have to be honest. Anyone who starts a business, you have to be honest. You have to understand you are going to be scared. I did it when I was in LA when I first got there, waiting tables. When you didn't know, where your rent was coming from. Living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
You have to also be in a situation where when you start a business, have some money saved so you don't stress.
Right.
And as soon as if that money starts going fast and fast and fast after a year and a half, well, what? Maybe you want to get a part-time job.
Right.
But that's the thing. It's just feeling comfortable in your skin and knowing that, starting a business isn't easy. I mean, it's not like people do it. I mean, me starting the Coop Tank, I only have 5 people in the group right now. That's why I'm also changing my thing. But I have other ventures going,
Yeah.
and so, but yeah, and know that there's going to be failure. You don't think I have all these people in Coffee with Cooper. I can only get 5 or 6 people in my paid group. You don't think
Right.
that makes me feel like crap? Like I feel like I'm a failure? I'm like,
Right.
no, it's not their fit. And you have to understand, you know, you just have to stick with it and just focus and believe. And sometimes it's going to take years to do that. But sometimes people get it right off the bat. But I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah, it's certainly not easy, and I think uh, that's all extremely true. So let me switch gears. I'm not sure if you can hear my dog barking.
That's
She's
all right.
going,
Don't worry.
she's going crazy
When I do
right
my
now.
interviews,
That'll be a little post.
I was interviewing Tracy Guns from LA Guns, and his daughter walked in. I was interviewing Timothy Busfield. He's married to Melissa Gilbert from Little House on the Prairie. I'm interviewing him. She walks through holding laundry. And he's like, oh, this is my wife. And I said, dogs are going to bark.
Yep.
We're not in a studio. It's fine.
Right. No, we're not in a studio. I did do one in a studio recently. That was kind of fun. Down in Media, PA with the guy. I don't know if you know Carl Starkey or not. He's done this awesome sauce, this powdered ketchup company. It's like pretty cool. But he invited me to come down to their studio, and it was the first time actually in a podcast studio, and that was pretty cool. So we all want to live a long time, most of us at least, maybe forever. What are 3 kind of healthy things, physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, that you're kind of working on to kind of increase your longevity?
You got a little time? It's going to take a little bit.
Go for it, brother. The stage is yours.
11 or 12 years ago, I just met Joanne, my wife. I was in LA. I was going to a party on Memorial Day. My friends live up the hill. They had these great parties, man. They had great lamb. They had great margarita. They had great tequila. And I smoked cigarettes at the time. And I felt like crap. And my feet were swollen. So I went up to their party. And usually I'd close that down. It's like 5:30. And I go, I got to go. I got to call an Uber. And they're like, what? Cooper, you're not. I said, I got to go. So I wake up the next morning and I felt like bad. Next morning I wake up and I'm just like, I couldn't move. I couldn't get out of bed. So I called my buddy. I go, take me to the hospital. I had congestive heart failure. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So I get in the hospital. I'm there for 3 days. Luckily, I got there on time. And I learned, I wasn't living a healthy life. I was partying all the time. I was single. I lived by myself. I was going to eating happy hour food all the time. And I screwed my heart up. I also didn't know, which we'll get into later, I had an irregular heartbeat. So I got out of the hospital, and I had to change my lifestyle completely. Cut down salt. I actually wrote a cookbook called Stop the Salt. Every month I make like $4 off it. It's awful. But so I learned I had to change my life. Luckily, my wife is very fit, and she was visiting. I think I may have had a heart attack, and I flew from LA into New Jersey, went to a Phillies game, got back. I don't even know how it happened, but the lady in the plane's like, you look awful. So I had to get that healthy back on track. So I got back on track. I quit smoking completely. I walked out of the hospital that one day. no more anything illegal, no more cigarettes, no more caffeine, all in one day. Didn't drink for 6 months. And I love drinking, but I said, I can't drink all the time. It's not good for me. Everything's fine. I moved back here, and I guess I stopped taking all my medicine because it was expensive, and had a friend shipping it to me from LA because my insurance was still good there. I just moved back. So I cut my doses in half. Well, I had an irregular heartbeat, AFib. I had AFib, and it was misdiagnosed. No one really ever thing. And once again, I started feeling like hell. I still remember the day. I had tickets to Parks Casino to see Stu Cook from Creedence Clearwater Revival. He was playing. I had interviewed him. I had front row seats, backstage passes. I went to Deborah to get a new cardiologist checkup. I walk into Deborah. I'm like, I'll get in this. I'll get home. Go. I'm in full AFib. My heart is beating so fast they can't even do an EKG. There's something called a injection fraction, whatever your heart. It should be 55 to 70%. Mine's usually 65. I was at 24. I'm not going to go into cardiac arrest. I sat there. I was in the hospital for 8 days. And I was getting married a few months later. And I was like, I don't want to die in a hospital. And there's nothing worse than just laying in a hospital bed. You're sitting there and you can't do anything. Nurse comes in at 5 in the morning when you finally get to sleep and jabs you. And the TV sucked. I wasn't getting Phillies games. I was getting Yankees games. It was just, but I got out and I had a man bra with a pocket defibrillator in case I went into cardiac arrest. And I was going to all these good events. I was an MVP section at the Eagles draft party, all these open bars. But I said, I can't drink because you look like an ass if you put like a pocket defibrillator in a bar and drink it. So I sat there and I said, I have to follow doctor's orders. And my heart bounced back. He thought I was going to have to wear that pocket defibrillator. He thought I was going to have to wear it till like August. Now I was getting married in September. But because I followed the doctor's orders, in June, I got rid of it. Okay, wow. I had some other laps because they did an ablation where they burn your heart and whatever. I had to get them 2 of them because it doesn't work. But as I got older, I said, I really have to watch my health. And I was in New York this 4th of July, and me and my wife were in Manhattan, and I walked a lot. We walked a lot. And when I got back, I said, I'm going to go to the gym. And every week, I'm going to walk 50,000 steps or 20 miles on the treadmill. Mm-hmm. And if I miss, I'm not going to kill myself because people do that. Like anything, if you say I have this goal and if you slip, you punish yourself. It's natural. So now, they put me on a statin and all that, but then I started exercising and my doctor comes in. He's like, oh my God, your cholesterol is like dropped 70%. That's from the statin and from exercising. Mm-hmm. The thing you got to do is you got to eat healthy. You have to eat healthy. You have to be aware. There's so much salt and stuff and we don't pay attention to it. Campbell's soup. You look at chunky soup, and it has the salt. You're like, well, that's not that bad. Well, you know what? It's for 2 servings. Well, I don't know anybody who's ever just eaten half a chunky soup. You eat the whole damn thing.
Right.
So exercise. Do that, man. Party, but just do everything in. Don't do it in excess. But if you want to have a long life, just look after yourself. Do it, and if you feel bad, if you're feeling like crap, go to the doctor, because if I hadn't gone, I went to the cardiologist and there was time. I would have been dead. We wouldn't be having this talking. Yeah. And actually, Deborah, where I went, did an article on me in their magazine called I was one of the lucky ones because I got there in time and I had met their marketing people through another Chamber of Commerce event. And they said, can we do an article on you? And they ran it. And it was picture of me and my wife on our wedding day. And yeah, a lot of people don't follow what they see. They don't follow what they hear. But, you only live once. And I've almost died. Like 2 or 3 times. And, and I feel lucky. And that's the thing. That's why you wake up, even when you feel like crap, just make sure you're okay. And then also with mental health, I know a lot of people, especially in entertainers, who have committed suicide, and I think it's also a thing where people have to know also, there's nothing wrong. If you're feeling depressed, reach out to someone. Some people think that's like going to make you feel weird. Or if you're in a business setting, they'll go, well, people won't want to do business with me because they think, I'm some head case. No, they won't, because, everyone's going through depression. We've all been bummed. We're Phillies fans. We're Eagles fans. We went through that depression. Be honest. So that's the other thing. With mental health, just be aware of it. Don't mock anyone. Don't sit there and go, oh, and that's the thing. Just be healthy, and that's the idea. You want to live. I mean, enjoy a cheesesteak. Cheesesteaks are great, but don't eat a cheesesteak every day.
Every day.
Mix in some veggies.
All right, so those are all great, and I love the personal stories mixed in there because it always kind of rings true with some people. Mystery question time. So, and I need like a cool sounder, like mystery question. But nobody ever listens to these, so they don't know the mystery questions. Great. I'm waiting for one guest. Yeah, there you go. See, I'll isolate that and use that next time. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Could be a physical thing, could be a altruistic kind of thing. What is something you would do if you knew you couldn't fail at it?
If I couldn't fail, something I would do. I would do a TV talk show.
There you
Late
go.
night show, because it'd have my comedy. I could do the stand-up in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I could interview people, which I love. I could get my friends who are very funny, who never got a break, job as writers.
Yep.
I could get musicians I know who never got a break. The job is my band. I could take care of people I could have people, all different guests. And I think that would be perfect, because then, now the only problem with that is, though, if you can't, it's hard though, because if you can't fail, because there's also, if someone had said to me 20 years ago, when I first started doing comedy, do a job, you can't fail, I would say, oh, I'll do a talk show, and it would suck. It would suck because I didn't go through life, I didn't do the interviews, I didn't do the comedy, I wouldn't be ready. And I think, but if that was something, I mean, that's a great question. It's something that I would love to have, Cooper, I don't know, Cooper Talk.
Cooper Talk. Nobody's ever said a talk show, so that's a first, and I love that answer.
What have some other people said? What have people said?
One guy said flying F-16 fighter jet, which I thought was cool. A lot of people do the physical stuff. The cooler, more like I guess compassionate people. Somebody said end violence. Somebody said my wife's cousin, when she wasn't on the show, but I asked her, she said climb Mount Everest. I thought that was a good one. Just kind of the things that you would probably die if you fail at. A couple people have mentioned.
Another, or I would say, be a musician, be a rock star, and play in front of 100,000 people. I've talked to a lot of people who played Live Aid, and it's sort of before your time, but for mine it was very, it was very impactful. And I've been lucky to talk about to like 15 people who were on Live Aid. Even the guy who co-wrote "Do They Know It's Christmas," something like that. If you knew you couldn't fail in front of 100,000 people, and you went up, even if you just played guitar and you sang.
Oh yeah. Yeah, get a big solo.
Get that energy. Yeah. Awful
solo in front of 100,000 people. That would be a good one too. That's one I haven't heard either. All right, well, let's wrap it there. This was great, Steve. I really enjoyed hearing some of your stories. I would love to have lunch sometime and hear some more of them. City Winery this weekend.
Is it when does this air?
That's a great question because it won't be in time. So just ignore that. Where can they find Coop Talk? How about that? Let's do that.
They can find Cooper Talk at coopertalk.net.
Okay.
There's over 950 episodes on there. They can find, or on iTunes, all that stuff. The Coop Tank, the show, cooptank.podbean.com, or on Spotify, iHeart, or Amazon. You can email me at thecooptank@yahoo.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Cooper Talk. And if you want to advertise on my show, Cooper Talk Local, I've been doing the show for 10 weeks. In the first 10 weeks, I've gotten over 120,000 viewers. Okay. I've had David from the Hooters, a bunch of great musicians, comics. Contact me at thecooptank@yahoo.com. I have great rates. You get a 30-second commercials on RBN TV. That's a website, but it's also on Roku or the Fire Stick. High end. I have my own late night set. It says the Coop Tank. And if you want to do different advertising, you can look in the magazines, but here you get my so air Fridays and Saturdays, plus it all goes on demand. So you have a residual advertisement. So they can check it out.
Well, there's no reason for people not to be able to find you then. You have a lot of avenues. All right. Well, it was fantastic, Steve. Thank you for your time today, and we'll talk soon. All right. Thank you, buddy.
Jay. Have a good day.
See ya.